So last night, as I was getting ready to go to bed at 9 p.m., because that's how wild and crazy I am, I was talking to my husband about this beautiful conversation I was about to have with you today and how you totally reframed the way I look at negotiation and the way the framework around it. And girl, I was in sales for 15 years. So thank you for being this voice on reframing this word that I think a lot of us struggle with. Looking back on your life, my friend, would you say that you are not surprised that you've sort of been the torch leader and the vocal at the front saying, I am leading this movement? Like, were you always vocal as a child? And
No. Um, so first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you as well. Um, a torch leader. I don't even know what to do with that. Um, but I'll start here. I didn't really exercise my voice growing
mm,
up. And I didn't have, I didn't think, I didn't think I had a lot of choices. And so I sort of lived my life um, in the light of my parents, and in sort of service to their kind of dreams and vision for my life. And when you do that, you don't feel like you have much power or a voice. Um, you don't give yourself any sort of decision making power. And so um, I'm not teaching. I didn't start teaching because this was something I planned, but this is absolutely that moment. And really bring yourself helped with this, right? It's that moment that I'm so sure that this is exactly the message. And
mm,
I'm privileged to have somebody like you calling me a torchbearer because I'm really passionate about this. I don't want my students, I don't want people walking around thinking that they have no power or a voice. That's a life lived in regret, which I think is a really a disservice to yourself, not to mention a pretty miserable life all around because you're not pursuing your passion, you're not pursuing your intuition, you're not, you don't look inward for your sort of North Star. And so I'm pretty passionate about this message, not because I grew up, being that person, but quite the opposite. And I feel like what I the mistakes I made, quite frankly, or the opportunities that I didn't take advantage of are the reason why I'm here.
mm. Girl, we are 5 minutes in and you're already taking me to church. You're about giving me, I'm getting goosebumps over here because as this is one of the many things I love about you is your realness, your mask down, human first, vulnerability to say, listen, I see you and I know you because I've struggled as well. And as you're sharing these words about not having a voice, I think we hear these buzzwords all damn day about chameleon mode, people pleasing. And you're like, what the hell is that? I was so focused on getting you to like me for so long that I didn't even know I was doing it. Maury, for
Right.
our listener who is like, yeah, I have lived my whole life to be the good daughter, good son, good student, good employee. I don't even know what I want for my life, but I have these gut whispers that I'm meant for more. What is one micro step that you can recommend that they do to begin to use their voice?
First of all, pause, right? Because typically those people are people who are like on automatic mode, right? Like we're just going. Like somebody wrote the script. We're not the directors. We're just acting it out. And so I think giving yourself that space and that time, which is what I think, a lot of people talk about what the pandemic did. I think it did slow us down in a lot of ways, right? And it did give us, and for some people really struggled with this, but it gave you that space to, for better or for worse, to look inward, right? And to think about the exhaustion that you have because you haven't set boundaries, but you didn't realize that before because you were just going, and now you're in one place, but you're still exhausted because now you're just going in another different way. And so when you kind of pause, I think, and give yourself the permission, I think, to look inward, to not worry so much about who you're going to please, like you said, what people want of you. And for some people, this could be 20 minutes a day. For some people, it could be just a brisk walk outside. For some people, they say, no, 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 I'm a 5:30 a.m. kind of person. That's when I'm best. So you read, you have that moment to yourself, you center yourself, and that's when you do it in your quiet time. So it's not a prescriptive thing, but I think just pausing in this ever so demanding life of ours is, I think, the very first step. And it feels like, sometimes people say in negotiations, well, what happens when everything's sort of escalating? And I'm like, breathe. And
Mm.
people want me to tell them some like magical like strategy. They're like, and I'm like, no, breathe. Like, get up and walk. But there's no words at that point. Like, that's not where you're going. You're saying, I'm going to pause. And so I think it's the same thing with this, is that really honoring your ability to sort of look inward. And it's difficult for a lot of people. What you see, you may not like, but you got to do it.
I love that. And as you're talking, my friend, it makes me think I've been so much, I guess the word I'm looking for is aware, because I have found that the phone was consuming my life. Every moment it was phone, laptop, maybe a little TV, phone, bed, rinse, repeat. I'm like, oh my God, my whole damn life is the phone. And when I heard you talk to AJ Vaden on the Influential Brand podcast, which guys, I'm going to link that in the show notes because, oh, I had to pull over the damn car. I was like salivating. I was writing notes. It was so good. And one of the things you said, Maury, that I loved, which speaks to your point on pausing, is viewing negotiation, changing your perspective of it into human communication. Can you elaborate
Yeah.
on that for us?
Yeah. I think that it's all about sort of connection, right? The power of connection. And unfortunately, what we've been connected to is our technology, right? It hasn't come necessarily in human form. And the truth is that, and I talk about this all the time, there's studies about this, we're made for distraction, right? Where distractibility is what we have been made for. Our minds work that way, right? And so as we've gotten more tools and, from the phones to the watches to the whatever it is, that's amplified what we've already sort of been bred for, right? So you have to be really, really, really intentional about addressing that, right? And again, this is the pausing, this is the taking space. Um, and it's funny because I don't know if I've never allowed phones in my class because I feel like that's a very sacred space, and you need, in order to learn about yourself and to look inward, you need that time and that space to do it. So that's sort of the rule we all honor. But I didn't really necessarily, I think, realize how bad it was for myself
Mm.
outside of class, until I started watching people around me. And it just became annoying, right? Like, we're on a trip or we're out somewhere. Do you really have to take a picture of everything that we're doing and then immediately post it on Instagram? What are you getting out of this moment? Or if we're sitting on a couch, like, you're on your phone, scrolling, because scrolling is like breathing, right? Like, I don't even know if they know, right? Because I was that person.
Mm.
And part of it is, like you, I'm quite type A, and the perfectionist in me that's always trying to do more work to fix something else. And, you know, until I really started, and again, I had to be actually quite still and mindful, I realized, wow, I don't want people around me to feel the way I feel, which is something else is competing with you and it's more important than you. So tying this back to human connections, negotiations, I know it drives so much anxiety and fear in people, but I think, it's a lot of that is sort of society bred, and the type of people that we see in the movies, and, negotiations that we often see as examples are like this, the headbutting, you know, who likes conflict, right? And if that's all you see of something, then and you think that's what negotiations is, you get anxious. But the beauty of negotiations, if you step back and you realize this is something we do all day long, every day, but the beauty of it is when you engage with people and you allow yourself to use this platform as not only sort of what we talked really earlier about as a platform to speak your own voice, but really an opportunity to connect with somebody on such a human level that if you think about it that way, that can't be anxiety ridden, right? This is a moment of curiosity. This is a really beautiful moment of um, intentional connection, right? It's a moment where, and because we don't have people give us that so often these days, because they are on their phones or you are competing with their attention. When you give that to somebody, when you give them your sort of full attention, when you're mindful and they see that authentically, then it's like you just watered a plant that just blooms right in front of you, right? It's like they open and they feel it. And people will know if it's authentic. People will know if your curiosity is authentic or it's not. But when they know it's authentic, when they know that it's purely grounded, not in a transaction, but just creating this human connection, I think it's magic. And
Mm.
and that's what I love about negotiations because it is that power of connection. It is the humanity in it that's really powerful.
I love that. And as you're talking, Maury, it made me flash to so many things. But one of the things that it made me flash to is I was just having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine the other day. She's VP level within an organization. And she said, Meg, the more I find that I've climbed this proverbial corporate ladder, people forget that I'm human. And they come to me thinking that I should have all the answers. They come to me with always an ask. To your point, that they just forget to talk to me like I'm a human. So as you beautifully articulated that just so well, what are some micro steps? How can we begin to approach these conversations, whether it's negotiations in the boardroom, around the dining room table? Because to your point, we do it all day long, regardless of what hat you wear. What are some things that we can begin to ask ourselves so we do show up human first?
Um, I think again, like these really simple things, but it's sort of the way you ask somebody how they're doing, right? That's one of the first things. It's like, how are you? And then like the next question, I'm here because I need to look at da 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 da. Or rather, you go and sit across from them, or if it's on a Zoom call, um, you say, "Hey, how are you today? How you doing?" And if they start talking about work, and you're like, "No, no, we'll get there. I'm just checking in with you. I just want to know how you're doing." And again, it's funny. There's one of the gentlemen who's in security in my building here where I live. I asked him, this is a long time ago. This is even before COVID. But I asked him one day when we were walking past each other, we always say hello and whatnot. And I said, how's everything going? And he goes, great. I said, wow, I wish everything was going great for me. I'm so happy to hear that. And, what makes your day great? And he said, nobody asks
Mm.
those questions. And he goes, people say like, how's your day or how you doing? They just kind of walk by me. And he goes, honestly, it wasn't so great, but I didn't really think somebody has the time for another answer.
Mm.
And, I get goosebumps when I think about it actually, because I thought, holy moly, like are we first of all that much on this like go, 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 where we don't have an opportunity to stop and see people and talk to them? And are we so caught up in our own life and our own sort of our needs, our wants, this, that, and the other, that we can't be really curious. And I think, again, giving people sort of that real gift of curiosity, I think is really important. And what I don't want people to do is come up with like the list of questions I'm going to ask people when I see them, because people do that too. Well, what kind of questions should I ask them when I'm trying to make small talk with them? I just said you have to be authentic. If I gave you a list of questions, it's not authentic, So, and I'll go back to negotiations for a minute, because again, I just think about it as a conversation. But you're first walking into somebody's office, you know, take note of everything around them,
Mm,
right? Look at them, right? What kind of mood are they in? Are they frowning a little bit? Do they look more sort of or acting more distant than they usually act? Right. Our emotional intelligence, when we use it, is so profound.
mm.
When we can tap into it, that like we're showered with information, but you have to be there to receive it. Right. So I would say work on that. Emotional intelligence is something actually that we can become much better at, and have being emotionally intelligent, something we can become much better at. And emotional intelligence is something that we can improve on constantly. There's so much body of work on this. Um, and when you tie it to things like being present and mindfulness, then it's sort of the gift that keeps on giving. So I
Mhm.
think, again, just taking note of people, right? Checking in even with yourself. Right? I have salary conversations with people, and they're like, "Well, how do I know that that's the right moment?" I was like, "It may not be. It's not. I'm not telling you not to negotiate your compensation package. I'm just saying, what does the person who's sitting across from you look like right now? Are they frowning? Do they look angry? Did they, before you walked in the room, could you hear them yelling at somebody on the phone? Perhaps this is not the right day, right? And that's just being present enough to pick up on those cues.
I love how you talk about these things. Isn't it the simplest things that we know we should do, but we don't do? Like there's something jacked up about us as humans where we overcomplicate shit. And I love how you're giving these things that are intrinsic gifts, but that we've lost them in this self-induced chaos. As you're
Yep.
sharing, Maury, that oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to add something to that because I was
Yes.
going to say, again, in forms of strategy and what have you. Um, that's why I think preparation for me is so important,
Mm.
for these types of conversations, or before you're going in to talk to somebody asking for help, showing them a project, preparing, and again, negotiations terms, it's usually about what you want as a goal, what you want as an outcome. But doing some emotional hygiene in advance is also really important, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, what is even a challenge for me sometimes when I try to overcompensate, um, and in that rush, in that frenzy of trying to get myself together, it is those moments that I actually do. I'm at my worst, right? I've over prepared. But I've prepared not the right thing, because what I should have really been preparing is that conversation with myself saying, what are you really anxious about, Maury? You've done this a million times. This is what you're good at. This is what you should do. Enjoy this moment, right? That is a form of preparation. But instead, because of the issues that I have with myself and the way I talk to myself, I am overcompensating. So you're coming in, frantic almost. How can you possibly be emotionally intelligent? So, just tying something like, again, like strategy for people, understand that preparation isn't just the numbers and the data and all that. Sometimes it is that conversation with yourself that says, you got this, right?
Mm.
Build your confidence, reward yourself for the work that you've already done. Because when I don't, and I go in like a crazy person, I sound like a crazy person.
I, girlfriend, that is a tweetable moment right here. Emotional hygiene. And you about just saw my soul right there because just last week, I had a client for the first time ever, Maury, tell me that they were dissatisfied with my content. And I immediately went to who am I to do this? I knew I'd jack it up. Like I started just
Right.
ripping my head apart for days and days. And then the next time I got on the call, because I didn't want them to think I was stupid, I over prepared. I had a whole outline. And of course, I spent hours on things I wasn't even listening to them. So, to your point, in the pause to ask yourself, what are you really scared of? And are you asking the right questions to understand the root of the other person? Because we're so quick to not want to look, air quotes, stupid of our own insecurities.
Yeah,
More,
absolutely. And you're overcompensating for something, right? That's all that is.
oh my God, that was another church service moment, my friend. That was a tweetable mic drop moment. Um, I want to talk to you about in this world, we have tendency to think that everyone has it together but us. And to your point a couple moments ago about the self talk, about the overcompensation, about the being your own worst critic, as you are building this movement and torch bearing it, what sort of hacks do you have when that asshole, that gremlin in your mind starts telling you, you suck, you fail, who are you to do this? What do you do? How do you talk back to
That gremlin will not leave me alone.
it?
It's
Preach, girl.
leave already, right? I don't know, like what you do to get that voice out of your head, and it's persistent. Um, the truth is that first of all, you're not alone. That I've learned,
Mm,
right? Like studies shows like 70% of people deal with imposter syndrome. It's cross gender. It's prevalent, right? And whatever, however you want to talk about it, some people are like, I don't want to call it that. We should give it another name. Whatever you call it, at the end of the day, it's the lack of self appreciation and self love. It just comes down to self love, right? And when we think that what's there to love, right? And when we think we're not good enough, when we think we're not deserving of, when we think that, um, you look in the mirror and you're never satisfied with what you see, right? You are constantly, and then let that be connected to somebody who, again, like I am, like be a perfectionist at that. No work ever gets done because it's never good enough. You'll never walk out of the house feeling super confident because something is wrong. You're you're like you were with your client, this thing is never going to be as good as it's going to be. So I'm going to actually stay up all night. Again, sound like a crazy person, right? Because it's never enough. It's just never enough. And I feel like, what do I do? There are days where, it is a very sort of sore and deep subject, but I've had kind of maybe body issues or self-image issues all my life.
mhm.
And um, there are days where when I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, the hair, whatever it is, that apple looks terrible. My legs, whatever it is, right? And then I stop. This is a very kind of pandemic induced thing, actually. I stop myself and I say, you're fine. You look great. You look great. And maybe some days I'll say, you look beautiful. And I sort of, I've actually not talked to anybody about this before, but I sort of make myself stand there until I believe it.
Oh,
And I say it over and over and over again, because now I understand that that voice has to be louder than the other one, right? It can't be a whisper. Like that gremlin is screaming. So, don't mess with me, gremlin. Look what I have for you, right? Like, so you're on the loudspeaker, but I say it to myself over and over again because I'm sort of at that moment rewriting my own narrative.
mm,
And I realize it takes work. I wish it didn't, but at least I recognize it and can correct it as opposed to carrying that weight around with me all day long.
mm. More, you're about taking me to tears, my friend, because I feel so much of what you're saying. And this is the shit we don't talk about because it runs deep and it runs raw and it's easy to run from it. And I appreciate you sharing so vulnerably and real and authentically. As you're talking, it makes me think not only of my own conversations I've had in the mirror, which I still struggle with too. And I've been on this journey for 7 flipping years. Like to your point, it's a journey. It's a journey. But
Yeah.
I one of the things that I got out of that beautiful conversation that you just had with us was the power of sitting with it. We are so quick to want to numb. So brush it off, run to the emails, run to the thing that gives you comfort, whether that's food, booze, email, shopping. Hell, at one point I had a mixture of all of it.
Right.
But allow yourself to feel it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's that, the great Brene Brown, you got to sort of walk through it. And again, none of this stuff is easy. It's ugly and it's painful. And, you know, we're always trying to fix something else. Fixing ourselves is a whole lot harder, right? Because it comes both with the recognition that we need fixing, but also the realization that that's actually great because we are evolving, right? Like, what is it if we can't constantly learn and change and become better? It's like, taking a document, taking my book, taking whatever it is, and you're constantly trying to make it better. And we forgive ourselves doing that because we're like, it's great. Or next time I'm going to do this and it's going to be even better. But somehow with ourselves, it's almost like if it's not the best, it's just not good enough. We're evolving, we are changing. And if you give yourself the ability to do that, right? And again, sit with it, that comes with the acceptance of you're not perfect. What is perfect? Right? I don't even know. But that also the growth and the scars and the bruises and the experience, they were all meant for this, right?
mm,
They brought you to this. And I think the sooner we understand that, and sooner that we know we're actually in control of changing, right? We're in control of, and I don't mean changing to be something else, changing that self-talk, that sort of, dipping in real deep into this water and saying, you know, it's a little cold, but the longer I stand here, I'm not going to feel that way anymore. It's going to be
mm.
comfortable. And you just become sort of comfortable in that space. And you become more aware, and then you're not beating yourself up for everything. What you start finding out is, you know what? That bruise actually is really beautiful because this is what it taught me, right? So taking accountability for those things and giving yourself the time and the space to do it, I think is really important, instead of, to your point, numbing it.
Mhm.
And sometimes you can't do it alone, and sometimes you need the help to do that. And this goes all the way back to that female VP. We are human, right? And we do need help. And and that's okay, right? That's really, really okay, because I feel like that's a sign of strength. I'm not very good at it, right? I'm not. But when you need the help, whether it's a therapist, whether it's people at work, it usually comes from the point where you realize you can't do something by yourself, and letting people in creates sort of that village.
Mm.
It shouldn't alienate you, right? And you shouldn't tell yourself that that's a bad thing.
Yes, I love that. I love that because I truly believe that we all have tribes, but for so long, hand raised, I was too air quote proud to let anybody in. I got it together, so I would hide in my little cocoon and only come out when I felt like I could put on a good face. I love that. Maury, I want to give some airtime to your book because your words are out in the world, girl, and it is beautiful. Bring yourself how to negotiate fearless. You had me at communicate with each other, as we talked about earlier. Phones up, hiding behind the screens. What a beautiful time for these words to come out. Can you sum up for us beautifully and articulately, like you can only do, about these words and your why behind it?
Yeah. Just what the big conversation now, and it keeps coming back up, is this notion of how maybe the biggest thing that we're challenged with, the biggest disease, if you will, is loneliness.
Mm.
And it's sort of this epidemic, right? And that's very sad to me, right? I'm somebody that can be, I'm fine being by myself. Um, and I'm so happy that I actually like myself enough to be okay with being alone with myself. But that notion of feeling like you're alone in the world, that there's nobody, um, is one deeply sad. But it's also that so many people are experiencing it and don't know what to do about it, right? So, the what I wrote this book for a lot of reasons. A lot of it was sort of busting myths, which we've talked about already. But it's this power of connection, because when we think about you're going into negotiations or these conversations, a lot of times we think about, it's almost like the picture in your mind is almost like you walk away, and hence this is sort of the break off, right? That you're, whether it's a handshake or whether it's a, I'm never going to do business with this person again, it's sort of a moment where people think this either breaks up relationships or it causes a friction that maybe makes that relationship deteriorate. But if again, we're having such a hard time building these moments of connection, and you instead think, you know, at least I can sit here with them through this process. And maybe, just maybe, if they see me as a human being, if they see me as wanting to have done this project better and trying to figure out if there's a better deal that we can get together, or asking them why this doesn't work for them, right? Then now that walking away comes with actually information which you can follow up on, you can make another call, you've now created a bridge, as opposed to sort of this blowing up that bridge, right? Like that this is now the thing that broke up your relationship.
Mm.
It is absolutely not true. Um, so I think it's if I may say so myself, I think it's, and I think that's why it's doing better, this book, to be honest with you, over time, is because it's something that's really important for people to understand. And in this very lonely world of ours, it's saying, you can change that. Like, here's your power. Lean into it really, really hard. It's all about human beings.
My friend, I loved you before we hopped on this call like a sick stalker that I am. And I love you 10 times more. You are a beautiful, authentic, real human who genuinely wants to help people. And in our industry, you see a lot of facade. You see a lot about these other things that really people have lost their why. And spending this time with you today, it's been so soul quenching. So guys, I am going to link if you want to stalk Maury like I so beautifully do. I'm going to link her Instagram and her website so you can get the book. I got one coming my way, and I have to tell you, Maury, thank you, thank you, thank you for using your wounds and your story to help heal others. I'm so proud to know you and love you and have you at this kitchen table with us.
Well, thank you. And I have to say something. You've been asking me about what is the one thing you can do, or some of the things that you can do.
Yeah.
Um, we didn't know each other, right? And you're reaching out. Um, sort of, there were days where I'm like, oh God, everything is so hard, everything is so terrible. And then here's this person I don't even know, not in a stalking kind of way, but in a way that says, I read the book. I love that you said this. Like, very much like, again, very authentically. And I think that that was the answer to the question you asked me, like, what can we do every day? Like, the fact that you so authentically and so genuinely reached out to me
Mm.
and have been so supportive, is should be sort of a lesson for other people. And we only used Instagram to do this, or you
Yeah.
only go online, so it can be done. It's just, you have to want to do it, and I'm deeply grateful to you for that. Thank you so much for all that. And I think when you do something, you don't know that you actually need it until you do it. I kind of really needed you today.
Oh, I'm giving you a tight, tight hug, and I needed you. Here's to the power in that. I love you, girl.
Thank you.